Hello and welcome to The Lowdown on the Plus Up, a podcast where we look at everyone's favorite theme park attractions, lands, textures, and novelties. We talk in, over, about, and through our week's topic, and then, with literally no concern for practicality, safety, or economic viability, we come up with ways to make them better. My name is Kelly McCubbin, columnist for the theme park website Boardwalk Times, and with me, as always, is Peter Overstreet, University Professor of Animation and Film History in Northern California. So, Pete.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today?
Well, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff today.
Boy, howdy.
Yeah, boy. Boy, howdy. Yeah, normally we're not a current events kind of show. We're more about history and nostalgia, and even though we do tend to look forward sometimes with our plus-ups.
Yeah.
Today is kind of interesting because you had your fingers deep in the Disney pie. Ooh. With D23. Do you want to tell us about that? Because it's going to lead into some fun stuff here.
I tell you, we run into current events like the E.P. Ripley running into the Rainbow Caverns mine train. That was the nerdiest thing I've ever said. Yeah, I spent a lot of this weekend being the de facto temporary, probably will never be hired for that job again, editor-in-chief of Boardwalk Times. We had a group of people doing a whole bunch of writing following the D23 show that was this week. And we had our actual editor-in-chief, Zach Perelstein, on the floor. So it was drinking from the fire hose with Disney news. 2 years ago, D23 showed up, and they didn't have a whole lot.
Yeah.
This year, they came loaded for bear. There's a lot of stuff, and we should start off with a victory lap.
Yes.
Because boy, and I'm not even going to say we called it. You called it.
Thank you.
Yes.
We collectively. Okay, so I get to brag. Okay, so in our very, very first episode, which if you haven't heard is available on all of our streaming sites, so you can go back retroactively and listen to this. Our first topic was great moments with Mr. Lincoln. Mm-hmm. And we talked about how we could plus it up. Mm-hmm. In our last section of that show, and I talked about how there should be some sort of corollary between Walt's obsession with Abraham Lincoln and also an interest of the history of the park because of so many people having a love and a nostalgia for Walt and his vision for the theme park. And I basically said, it'd be kind of cool if you got to see Lincoln as a animatronic as usual with updated methods that they're using today, but then also have perhaps maybe an animatronic Walt performing the opening lines for the park or introducing himself, and he's in his studio, and it's basically the wonderful world of Disney Walt in his gray suit with the little Japanese marker tie on his tie pin on. And lo and behold, at D23, the news was announced that that is exactly what they are going to do.
Yeah. I want to give you even more credit here because I think your idea was better than the idea that they had. I'm going to try and sort of remain agnostic on the idea of animatronic Walt because I have some nice feelings about it and some not so nice feelings about it. But your idea of incorporating Walt into the show, where this is sort of like Walt's childhood, this is things that inspired Walt, and here's his inspiration being turned into reality, and then it cascades into Lincoln.
Right.
And then you go experience the rest of the park after that. Mm-hmm. That was beautiful. Just beautiful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I really would have loved to have seen it, making that part of, if you really wanted to do it, it's like admired but not required. But for all of us history nuts or people who really want to kind of dip their toes into that, they could literally just walk right in, go straight to there, open their whole experience at Disneyland by doing that, and then kind of zigzag back and forth across Main Street to different points of interest that could be installed that include little plaques or little vignettes or little displays that kind of help you kind of go, oh, this was all about the days when he was here, and this is the development of the park, and this was his inspiration for this. So by the time you finally got to Partners in the hub, you suddenly, had been with Walt on this inspiration of building the park. Yeah. You would go to the wall with all of the mislaid bricks, and you would go to, you see the red and white light bulb, and you would go to see all these little, nice little fun little details that all of us nerds love, but suddenly it all makes sense why we love it. And then you would reach Partners, and you could turn around and go, and now enjoy the rest of the park.
Did you see, by the way, the woman that cosplayed as the red and white bulb?
Whoever that is, lady, you're a genius.
Oh, man, it was so good.
Her Coca-Cola hat, oh, my God.
And did you see her purse was a little mini piano?
Yes, it was so good. I never laughed harder in my life, and, in joyous rapture at a cosplay. It was so good.
Yeah, just absolutely brilliant. I was like, I just want to be friends with that person. But, there's an interesting thing that comes out of this this Walt animatronic show idea that I think will play into some of the stuff we're going to talk about a little bit later. And I know we're not ready to jump there just yet, but there seems to be a sense that Disneyland Park is being earmarked as this is the historical one. And they're going to make changes, of course. But this seems to be the slightly more sacrosanct of parks.
I think part of that is the fact that Walt actually lived there.
Yeah.
This was his baby. He actually lived there. It was his home for a time. So I think, yes, there's a little bit of, for those who are very loyal to the memory of Walt number 3, as we like to refer to Uncle Walt, the memories of Uncle Walt. Those people, and you and I are certainly among their numbers. Yeah, they do have a kind of a sense of ownership because of that. And like this is sacred territory. Don't change this. Yeah. You could do anything you want to with Tomorrowland. Please do something with Tomorrowland. but don't mess with this. Well, don't mess with that,
Well, and so before we get to how this might be the place where they're going to try and hold history a little more in stasis, and Florida is not. Before we get to that, was there anything else about D23 that really struck you?
One of the things was for all of us Marvel nerds. Yeah. They started talking about the Fantastic Four. Yeah. Which is one of my favorite comic books growing up as a kid.
Oh, sure.
For those who don't know, I'm going to name drop for a minute. My summer internship right out of college, I was actually working for Stan the Man Lee. And
you told me about this.
My 3 greatest months of my adolescent life. It was amazing. It was. I turned into the Frosted Mini Wheats kid, where it's just like the adult in me is like moving forward in my career, but the little kid in me is pooping my pants with excitement. I mean, I really actually did that. We went out for lunch one time, and I'm on one side of the table.
You want to tell this story out loud?
Yeah, I kind of do. On one side of the table is Stan. He goes, "We're going to be meeting up with a friend of mine. I hope you don't mind." I go, "Yeah, no problem, Stan. You're the boss. You meet up with whoever you like." And we were at Planet Hollywood in San Diego during San Diego Comic-Con, and in comes Lou Ferrigno. Whoa. So I'm sitting at the table with the Incredible Hulk and Stan Lee, and I'm just waiting for him to go like, "All right, true believer, just order some chicken wings," And, "Hello, how are you? I'm Lou Ferrigno. Nice to meet you." And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm turning into a little kid. This is the best.
Oh, that's
I was
awesome.
so awestruck. I did not get either of their autographs.
Oh, wow.
I wanted to desperately, but I'm like, no, I want to be a pro. I don't want to be a nerd. I want to be nice. But oh my God, lunch with, anyway. So, but I grew up with the Fantastic Four. Yeah. And I thought of Kelly. Like the minute I was watching this footage going, oh, please tell me Kelly is watching this. And sure enough, my phone, while I'm thinking that, goes, ring, are you watching the D23 stuff? Because I'll let Kelly tell this one.
Inevitably, it is not an episode of The Lowdown on the Plus Up without us talking about the 1964 World's Fair, which is clearly the alpha and the omega of everything we know. There was a great panel at D23 Zach, the editor of Boardwalk Times, was there. Terrific panel where they were discussing the fair and the influence that the fair had on theme parks in general, but specifically Disneyland. A lot of things came out of it. It's a Small World, the Carousel of Progress, the People Mover cars, those
my bad.
Linear induction movers.
Yes.
Yeah, those came out of there. The Primeval World from the diorama on the Disneyland Railroad came out of there. Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln came out of there. Mm-hmm. It was a great opportunity for Walt to develop attractions on other people's dime. And then ship it
basically
back.
Giving all those dimes to Bob Gurr to build it all. Right?
Here you go, Bob. Build us. I'm thinking about a spinny kind of car.
I'm on it. No problem. I'm on it.
Man, I was trying to get someone to get me one of those Bob Gurr Funko Pops that they were selling there.
I know.
And I couldn't find anyone to do it.
Come on.
But so the panel was great. And as it went on, it was hosted by Leonard Maltin. A lot of Becky Klein, head of the archives, was there. I believe the director of the movie Tomorrowland was there. No, I'm sorry, not the director. Who am I thinking? I'm thinking of the art director.
Okay.
It was there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Michael Giancini showed up at one point, and at a certain point, Kevin Feige and Jon Favreau came out to talk about how much they were influenced by the sort of futuristic work of the 1964 World's Fair.
Yeah.
And then it just got real good. So then they're talking about how this mid-century modern look really influenced the film that's about to come out, which is Fantastic Four. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I'm just at this point giddy because I'm like, this is exactly what I want this film to be.
Yep.
This is what I want all futures to be. I want them to all look like they were a Clifford Simak book with a Mary Blair color palette. And
I'm in.
That's what I want. And there was some indication that this maybe was a way that the things in the park in the future could maybe go. Mm-hmm. Pete and I were talking earlier, my theory is that if Fantastic Four does really well, and I'm really hoping it does, this could be the Tomorrowland look that we've been hoping for a long time.
They will finally bite the bullet and actually get rid of the rocket, the rocket racers track. Rocket Rod's track, or as Bob Gurr referred to it, the world's largest
leaf catcher.
Yeah. It's like, oh man, that poor thing.
But the greatest thing about this panel, that was all fantastic, but
Sorry.
but the greatest thing about the panel was Feige and Jon Favreau talking about trying to get someone to write a World's Fair kind of song.
Yeah.
For the movie Iron Man 2, for the was it the Stark Expo? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
And this great conversation where someone says, well, we could call Dick Sherman. And Feige has the greatest thing. He just says, can I do that? Am I allowed to call Richard Sherman? And so sure enough, he does. He calls Richard Sherman, and they first off, Sherman's very wary because he's like, I feel like you're trying to make fun of this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they have to assure him, no, that's not what they're trying to do. They really want a sincere, song about progress and positivity.
Yeah.
And then they whip out this thing that no one knew existed. They had a film of Richard Sherman playing them that song for the first time. Ugh. Make Way for Tomorrow Today. Ugh. And it is so beautiful. Mm-hmm. And he plays the song and they start talking afterwards. And I'm ranting now because I'm passionate about this. They start talking afterwards. And Sherman says something to the effect of, you're all really young and you may not realize this, but people want this kind of positivity. Mm-hmm. They're all too cynical now and it's not good for them. They want this. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, man, bless you, Richard Sherman.
Yeah. Yeah. He is sorely missed.
He is
sorely missed. That type of optimism. I mean, for all my cynicism, that I have, I certainly have a cynical streak. I always have this anchor of possibility and optimism that never goes away. And honestly, that really came from the dream and promise of early Tomorrowland and Epcot.
Yeah.
And frankly, a lot of that has to do with the Sherman Brothers music.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think one of the most perfect songs I know is There's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's absolutely perfect.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you saw any of the Disney Legends ceremony, but Jamie Lee Curtis came out on stage and led the audience in a sing-along of There's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
That's so great.
So, it's this approach to tomorrow that Disney is, they made tons of announcements for what is coming up in the future. Some good.
Oh my God.
Some really amazing, like the Villain's Land, which heard that, I kind of went, where was this 20 years ago?
Yeah.
But as we all know, with change and with progress comes sacrifice.
Yeah.
And there are some changes that are making some people kind of, these days, whether it be changing for better or for worse, Splash Mountain and Tiana's Adventure. And I can't wait to see it.
Me too.
I'm not going to judge it until I see it.
Our good friend Paul Berry went to Florida for a single day.
Just to see it.
He flew in.
Yep.
He saw the new Country Bear show. He rode Tiana's. He had a meal. He went home.
Sounds about right. That sounds about right. Sounds like Paul.
But he loved it.
Yeah. And I'm cool with change. I really am. But there are some things that I'm curious to, like the motivations and what we give up when we change things like this. And this is going to lead us to our new subject because, again, this is another thing that's coming up that was announced at D23 as part of the announcements there. And it has actually got some people riled up. And so we're going to take aim, set our sights on, lock and load on the subject of the shooting galleries of Disneyland and Disney World. Yeah. And the reason I mention this is because they are outmoding the shooting gallery in Frontierland in Disney World.
It's gone.
It is gone now.
Yeah. And this is, it's interesting. We must be psychic or some sorts of super geniuses because, hey, who's here to contradict me? So, because we planned this a little while ago and we kind of got busy and didn't record it until now, but we planned it before these Frontierland announcements were made. Yeah. Also, before these Frontierland announcements were made, I wrote a long article about Frontierland. Yeah. And just sort of the origins of it and where these ideas come from and maybe what you can do with it now. Yeah. What we are seeing is that Frontierland in the Magic Kingdom in Florida, it seems to be hanging on to its name, maybe, but it is not going to be Frontierland anymore. And the first step of that we saw was getting rid of the Frontierland shooting gallery in that land. A lot of people were curious about that move. Now it starts to make a lot more sense because the frontier western aspect of the land is being kind of excised. Yeah. And with that comes the sort of centerpiece in a lot of ways of that area, certainly. The Rivers of America and the Liberty Bell riverboat are going away. They will not be there. That's kind of weird. It's bizarre. That weirds me out a little bit. I mean, I get it. I get what they're going to do. I'm actually kind of hopeful for what they're planning. But it has been such a staple for so long. Again, it's one of those, you could just kind of go, really? You're going to get rid of that, huh? It's bold. And it is very bold. And, the thing that they're putting in what seems to be not a Cars Land, but a sort of Cars mini area there, which is going to traverse from the Frontierland mainland all the way to Tom Sawyer's Island, which will no longer be Tom Sawyer's Island. And there's going to be what looks to be a pretty spectacular ride there. And I'm sure the design's going to be beautiful. And it weirds me out too. I'm not against repurposing Frontierland, and I'm not against repurposing Tom Sawyer's Island, but I don't understand what this is now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think this stems from America's discomfort with the Wild West.
Some of it, yeah.
Some of it really is. I mean, your article kind of touched on that a bit. Mm-hmm. Because you ask different people, what does the Wild Wild West mean to you?
Yeah.
Good old frontier. The frontier. What does that mean for you? And for some people, the first thing out of their mouth is racism.
Sure.
Or colonialism.
Which is fair.
Totally fair.
Yeah.
And for other people, it's like, it's the last time America was great.
Right.
Okay, that's fair too.
Yeah.
It's the last time Americans really had freedom.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it.
I hear you.
I hear you, Johnny Reb. Yeah. But you know, the Wild West means so many different things to so many people.
Yeah.
And no one can agree upon it.
Yeah.
And I think that actually it spells its doom eventually.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I talk about in that article is the work of Frederick Turner, a Harvard professor, who basically gave us the idea of what the West was. Mm-hmm. It was like, this is what the frontier is.
Yeah.
It wasn't true.
No.
Even Turner himself seemed to understand that later. He stopped defending his work pretty quickly, actually. Didn't want to talk to people about it. You know, even he seemed to not really buy into it, but it was what the popular vision of the West was. It came from Turner's theory of the frontier line. And that theory just, you know, it has a lot of manifest destiny in it. It's got a lot of the sort of populism idea of moving away from the elites and we'll forge our thing, you know, our brutal independence. Mm-hmm. But it just wasn't true. And people now generally realize that it wasn't true. So if you are going to treat Frontierland as some sort of educational piece about history, it doesn't work.
No. Well, it's the same thing. It's kind of, I was actually talking to some of my students, one of my animation classes that I teach. We were talking about composition. Mm-hmm. And I brought up the Brandywine School of Painters.
Yeah.
And the founder of the Brandywine School was a gentleman by the name of Howard Pyle.
Yeah.
And Howard Pyle has a great deal of influence, actually, on Disneyland, more so than I think people understand. This guy was so influential, even during his lifetime, that Vincent van Gogh once wrote a letter to his brother Theo saying, I just got this Scribner's magazine. And I was looking through it, and there was these fantastic paintings by this guy named Howard Pyle. You have got to see his stuff. Like, Van Gogh was an admirer of Howard Pyle.
That's amazing.
Not Howard Pyle, I'm sorry. Howard Pyle.
Yeah. The Brandywine School.
The Brandywine School. Yeah. One of his students was Edward Schoonover, and another one was N.C. Wyeth.
Wow.
And N.C. Wyeth taught his son Andrew Wyeth, and Andrew Wyeth taught his son Jamie Wyeth, who taught another person, who taught another person, who taught me.
That's amazing.
As an illustrator. So I'm considered academically a descendant of the Brandywine School of how you draw and how you set up your scenes. And the reason I bring this up is that Pyle put out these books that he wrote and illustrated himself. Mm-hmm. And they were focused on Knights of the Round Table. You watch Sword in the Stone. Mm-hmm. It may be based off of, you know, the Once and Future King, but actually, when you look at it, it's Howard Pyle.
Wow.
The look of Sword in the Stone comes very much from Howard Pyle. If you look at any Robin Hood movie at all, including our, you know, Robin Hood, Little John run through the forest, even when you look at that, that's Howard Pyle.
Yeah.
And anything that is everything about Pirates of the Caribbean comes from Howard Pyle.
Wow.
You can actually see distinct pirates. There's a pirate at the well scene. That is from one of Pyle's, the guy who's yelling at the mayor, getting dunked in the well. Where be the treasure?
Yeah.
That guy is based off of one of Pyle's paintings. You look at it and you go, oh my God, it's that guy. And they even have a scene where the mayor is tied up. That whole, like, all that's missing is the woman popping out of the window going, don't be cheeking. And the reason why I bring this up is that is the same era. This is like the turn into the 20th century, 1890s into the 1915s.
Yeah.
That spread of 30 years of young adult fiction and fantastical novels of adventure and the fantasy of these notions of chivalry and empowerment and that kind of stuff. And and this has led me to think very deeply actually about the subject we're going to be talking about with the shooting galleries, because this kind of takes us into this, is that these stories are meant to empower children that are only halfway through this era, are starting to be included in labor laws.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
And, suddenly they get to be kids. Yeah. They're not just, oh, we pumped out a baby and now we can put him working in the blacking factory.
Yeah.
It's like, no, he is going to be his own human being. He is going to be self-reliant. It's this notion of compulsory education and we're going to move forward. Yeah. Henry Ford needs workers, so we better educate them. That kind of stuff. I'm sorry, did I go that too far? But that kind of brings up the point of the working class child getting empowerment through fantasy. Whether that fantasy comes through the morals, even if they are fantastical morals, of the code of chivalry with King Arthur, or the notion of robbing from the rich and giving to the poor, which no doubt there was a lot of that type of fantasy and hero worship with figures like Babyface Nelson and Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh, sure. Because
they had this kind of they were referred to as Robin Hood-like figures.
Yeah.
And a lot of that had to do with this popular notion of, stick it to the man, because it's the working class people going, someone like this, something I grew up with.
Yeah.
Same thing with the pirates, the romanticism of looking hot and being rock stars of the sea, when in fact the reality of piracy is really horrible.
Oh, it's awful.
It's awful. There's no Jack Sparrow out there. So it's all these, syphilis-ridden rapists out there.
Well, isn't this an interesting comparison too? Because we talk about like Frontierland isn't telling an accurate history. And I don't say that because I mean that Frontierland is bad at all.
No.
I love Frontierland.
I'm right there with
you. But it's not telling an accurate history.
No.
And the pirates aren't telling an accurate history.
No.
And yet somehow we're still finding a way to work with pirates. And we're struggling to work with cowboys.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because when you really think about it, they're not that far off from each other.
They're not. They're both living these kind of horrible existences on the plains. I mean, or in ships or whatever. Like, the truth of the frontier is far more Cormac McCarthy than it is John Wayne.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think that, why I mention all of these kids' books is that these are the types of books that Walt himself would have grown up with.
Absolutely.
And so these notions definitely show up at Disneyland's and even in his animated shows and his movies, Treasure Island and The Black Fox and Dr. Sin, alias the Scarecrow. Johnny Tremaine, let me pour some pewter on my hand. Good going, Johnny. It's these romantic notions of history rather than factual pieces of history.
Yeah, and you can't really fault Walt for what he was taught along the way. No. I mean, certainly to talk about the frontier, like the Frederick Turner theory was strong in the schools for the entire time Walt was in school. Yeah, and for the entire time that the Western was in absolute ascendance as movies. Mostly in the late 30s to early 60s.
Yeah.
It was strong. People really, really believed that to be true.
It struck a chord. It was the most popular media format.
Yeah.
Genre, of film, television, comic books.
Yep.
Until the space race.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, seriously, and until 1964.
Yeah.
Because that's when superheroes kind of crawled out and went, like it was Westerns, horror comics, and then superheroes in the 50s. That was, those were the popular medias for kids that they could take a quarter or a dime out of their pocket and buy themselves.
Yeah.
My argument would be that we see the exact same need for empowerment from the kids of the 50s.
Yeah.
As we saw for the children of Walt's era, with the romanticism, this pursuit of empowerment through fantasy. It may not be historically accurate, and its intentions might have been good, but so many people just accepted it as writ, that it was like, oh, well, of course, that's the way it was,
I think you make such a strong point. Like there is a use for these kind of elaborate, fantastical conflicts.
Absolutely.
Kids need this to just model triumphing over adversity.
We're seeing that now.
Yeah.
With, if you just want to stay in Disneyland, you see that in Batuu.
Sure.
In Galaxy's Edge.
Absolutely.
You see that. You're very, very apparent with the New Order on one side.
Yep.
You've got three corners. You've got smugglers, you've got New Order, and you've got bounty hunters.
You've got Joy Division.
Yeah, and you got... If only that cantina was any sort of Joy Division, I would have been into it. But anyway, but you see these clear, like it has moved on to space opera and fantasy rather than dipping into history because people now have such access to history that they can go, I don't need to treat this as a fantasy. I'm okay with this reality of what this actually was in history, and it makes me uncomfortable, so I can't take any joy and empowerment out of that.
Right. The Lowdown on the Plus Up is a Boardwalk Times podcast. At boardwalktimes.net, you'll find some of the most well-considered and insightful writing about the Walt Disney Company, Disney history, and the universe of theme parks available anywhere. Come join us at boardwalktimes.net.
Who have different traumas.
Yes.
And are willing to accept stuff like Galaxy's Edge. Because Star Wars, just look at the name.
Yeah.
It's about war.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a second. Why would we want that in Disneyland?
Right.
And yet people go, no, it's not just about war. It's about fantasy. Whether you want to be a space wizard, whether you want to be a tough guy that's basically a cowboy as a bounty hunter, or whether you want to be... you want to be empowered because you're going to be a stormtrooper. Right. Whatever it is, it's all about empowerment.
Yeah, it is. You're totally right. And I do want to say I don't know of. I did a little cursory looking, but I'm not a sociologist. I just play one on TV. But I did some cursory looking to see like what were the studies? What does it look like as far as violence in people who grew up playing with toy guns?
Yeah.
There's not much. There's not a whole lot of evidence that it affects things one way or the other. I do want to say if you're a parent and you have kids and you do not want your kids around guns or toy guns, absolutely, I support that.
100%.
100%.
Yep.
I'm interested in toy guns. Real ones freak me out.
Yeah.
and I do not want them. But
and as a moment of sensitivity, as Kelly and I are both parents.
Yes.
We do want to, this is partly a disclaimer, but this is also a statement of sensitivity. We are not marginalizing anybody who has suffered at the hands of gun violence, either in schools or in any other situation. Gun violence is bad, 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 bad.
Right.
And we are not in any way condoning that. That's not a hand washing. I just realized that some of you might be listening to this and going, oh, this might be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Don't worry, we're not going to dwell on it too much.
Right.
But we are going to approach this with a notion of, well, as we usually do, a historical take on it, and we will do a plus up at the end of this that might solve some of these problems.
Right.
So just wanted to be sensitive to all of you listening out there.
I think, in 2001, and you probably ran across this doing research too, in 2001, the California legislature passed a law that said that all toy guns must be made in such a way that they cannot be mistaken for real guns. That is the law in California. That is why if you ever do see toy guns in store, which you don't much anymore, but if you do see them, that is why they're usually bright orange.
I remember growing up in the 80s, this is when Rambo was an animated show for kids.
Jesus.
Yeah. Along with Mr. T, it's like, wow, this was a good idea.
Yeah.
Sergeant Slaughter on G.I. Joe, I remember playing with a squirt gun that was a motorized Uzi.
Yeah.
That came with clips that you would fill up with water. And so you would, and it would, and it would be shooting little jets of water. But it was the exact same size. And I, being the weird little kid that I was, I found a tube of my grandfather's Rub and Buff, which is like this metallic paint, and I dry brushed it, making it look even more realistic.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I was a real smart 10-year-old, let me tell you. And sure enough, a cop actually slowed down and like, is that real? And I went, no, it's a squirt gun. And I never played with it afterwards because I realized how close I was to getting in trouble with the cops because they were nervous because there had been a controversy where a kid was shot playing with one of these things.
Yeah.
And that's when I kind of realized, like, why do we play with guns? And I never played guns after that, ever.
Yeah.
That was that one moment. I was totally into it, and then I was suddenly not. And I think it was that moment.
Once the guns became real for you.
Oh, yeah.
Like a authority figure accused your toy of being real, and then it's no longer
suddenly it wasn't fun. Yeah, I couldn't go bang, bang, you're dead now. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Couldn't do it. I wasn't interested. I mean, I even got rid of my G.I. Joes. Like, I just couldn't, like, I could deal with fantasy war toys like Star Wars or He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, which I became obsessed over. Yeah. And I think it's because I gave up on, I had tons of G.I. Joe stuff. Right. And because they were neat. The vehicles were cool. You had Zartan who would change color in the sun. That's cool. But I just it was like instant, like, no. Give me fantasy. That's fine. Yeah. Because you're not going to get shot by a cop carrying a plastic He-Man sword. Right. Right. So, but you still get the same empowerment. Yeah. Which is going to be a word I'm going to keep using tonight because I really think that there's something to this. There's a need. Yeah. And so when Walt built Disneyland, I think he had the same thing in mind with a lot of his worlds. It wasn't just, oh boy, this is neat. I think he actually was really trying to give people an escape. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about escapism, most people go like, oh, an escape, I'm going to sit on a beach and drink a Mai Tai. Right. But Walt introduced something with a theme park in which, no, we're going to immerse you in this world. Yeah. Well, why would you do that? That doesn't make sense. It's like we're going to put you in the jungle. I don't want to go to the jungle. Well, you really think about it. No, I really don't. Yeah, I do. Why? Because it's cool. Because I feel empowered. Like I'm going to have an adventure. I'm going to be empowered. Yeah, you get, and we've talked about this before. Yeah. You get to have the triumph. You get to face a fear in a very safe way. Mm-hmm. You get to triumph over it, and then you get to move on with that kind of in your little satchel of like, I did this. I can beat this fear. Yep. And so when Walt opened up Disneyland in 1955, you could walk down Main Street. Yeah. And right where the Gibson Girl is now, there was a real, honest to God, air rifle shooting gallery. Yeah. Yeah. and there's pictures of like these beautiful girls like sitting on the counter.
I saw that and I was like, that is the greatest picture. I'm like, what? What were they thinking?
Nice gams. Boom. You know, like what? And it was like a standard carnival style and a pool of water in it.
Yeah.
I think it's to prevent ricochets. I mean, it looks cool, but I think it's also to prevent, the lead pellets, because they would shoot lead pellets.
Yes.
At metal targets.
Well, so that is the first shooting gallery.
Yep.
And do you know what kind of gun it is?
It's a Winchester, isn't it?
That's right. That's good, Glenn. It's a Winchester Model 62A gallery gun.
Oh, wow.
Is what the Main Street gun was. But let me back up a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Paul MacGlashan.
Okay.
This is the guy, MacGlashan Enterprises is the company that built all of those shooting galleries.
Huh.
And I'll give you a quick look into the future. In 1969, the Walt Disney Company buys MacGlashan Enterprises, but and kind of lets them keep operating independently. Weirdly, but Paul MacGlashan is an interesting character.
Okay,
so
I know nothing of him, so please elucidate.
Super interesting.
Okay,
so in the 1930s, MacGlashan started basically building shooting galleries, but at the time the technology was completely new. They were just making it up as they go along. You can find pictures, because a few of them still exist, of some of his original guns that he made for shooting galleries. The earliest ones didn't put ammo in, you put nickels.
Oh my God.
And it would shoot nickels at the targets.
Oh my God.
And then if you did a certain thing with the targets, you would get some sort of prize. And guess what? The people who ran the gallery got to keep the nickels.
I kind of see the practicality of that.
Yeah, no, there's a brilliance to it.
I kind of like that, Okay. Right.
So he starts working on building different kinds of shooting galleries. He's just what he's interested in. He does it up until the war starts, and he sees this interesting need. So by this point, he's starting to use air-compressed BB guns, basically, for shooting galleries. He realizes that it is cost prohibitive. It will be a drain on the Army or the Air Force at this point to actually practice being a gunner with real guns and ammo. Ammo costs money.
Yeah.
Right. And you use a lot of it when you're a plane gunner.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So he builds these air-run BB turrets for gunners to practice with.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. So he works with the U.S. government. He builds these things. He supposedly builds some for ships too, but I didn't see a whole lot of record of that. But he built guns to emulate being one of those bubble gunners that rides on the bottom of the plane. Yeah. The ones who, if the landing gear doesn't come out, you're in a heck of a lot of trouble.
I've seen that episode of Amazing Stories. I know that very well.
Sure, I listened to enough Pink Floyd albums.
Yeah.
Sorry, Raj.
Sorry, Casey.
But so he built this thing for them to train with.
Yeah.
For cheap, and he built a target range for them to do.
Wow.
And it's referred to in a Steinbeck book.
What?
Here, let me read you this great quote.
Oh, please.
This is from Bombs Away, the story of a bomber.
Do I need a glass of whiskey to suggest this? Okay, go ahead.
So Steinbeck actually, it's a nonfiction book. He embedded himself with a bomber team.
Oh, wow.
In the war.
Wow.
He says, at a gunnery school, there is constant practice. The compressed air BB guns were in use all the time. There is a shooting gallery, only very much larger than any private shooting gallery. Mounted at intervals are little machine guns which operate by compressed air. They fire streams of BB shot at moving targets. The targets are little planes which move rapidly across a blue background, but when they are hit, they fall backwards. These guns are in use all the time. The gunners are encouraged to use the constant shooting of these guns, to use them whenever they are free. And although the little guns do not fire at a very high velocity, nor do the planes move very fast, the constant shooting of these guns develops the shooter's eye, making him aware of a moving target and how to lead it. He learns here not to fire a constant stream and let the plane run into it, but to fire in bursts so that each shot takes effect. It is said that when the gunnery students go to town, they head first for a shooting gallery, shoot at ducks and moving pipes and clowns' heads, that they spend their money on cartridges in private shooting galleries.
Okay, that's wild.
Isn't that crazy?
That is wild. And it's interesting you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Because that actually takes us into the history of the carnival shooting range.
Yes.
And why they died.
Okay.
Okay, so little deep dive. Here's Pete Overstreet's deep dive. We talked about empowerment, and we'll get back to what's
MacGlashan. Paul MacGlashan.
Paul MacGlashan. We'll get back to him in just a second here. Well, not a second. It'll be a couple of minutes. So
no worries.
Grab a soda, folks. Okay. Shooting galleries have a history of playing a part of empowerment with the working class.
Yeah.
For hundreds of years. There has always been some sort of knockover game.
Yeah.
Whether it be
Cupid doll.
Well, even earlier, whether you have Skittles,
Yep.
or nine pins, or bowling. One of the greatest Skittles players ever, apparently, during the 18th century was a man born without arms or legs.
Whoa.
His name was, and he was also one of the world's greatest calligraphers. He did a self-portrait of himself using, and when you look closely at it, all the shading is done with little words, and it spells out the Lord's Prayer over and over again.
Wow.
And he was also a very accomplished magician. He could do the cups and balls routine perfectly, apparently. And apparently...
he didn't have arms or legs?
He'd had no arms or legs. He basically had like little flippers, basically.
Okay.
And he fathered 14 children. His name was Matthias Buchinger, the little man of Nuremberg.
Wow.
And he was world famous for being a Skittles player. So there's my obscure history drop there for a minute. But even earlier...
Yeah.
There's right around Shakespeare's time, and we don't have many other records because see part where it's the Dark Ages.
Yes.
Even though there have been knockover games, they're very, very similar. You toss a ball or a rock at some sort of effigy to knock it over. And this pastime is so old, and it always ties to some sort of lower class shooting upward at the upper class.
Yeah, interesting.
In the 1973 version of The Musketeers, directed by Richard Lester, starring Michael York,
I love
Christopher Lee, the mighty Christopher Lee, as Count Rochefort, is playing a game that is historically accurate. And they actually used to have a version of this at Renaissance fairs, in which they have these polished wooden balls. They bring them out, peasant would bring them out this basket.
Yeah.
And you lay bets on how many things you could knock over. And there were these big flats, and there were cutouts of upper-class men and women. And you just toss the ball at them, and they're propped up with a stick, and you hit them enough times until they fall over. And it's literally just called Lords and Ladies.
Yeah.
And so you're playing Lords and Ladies, and you throw it at them, and the ball rolls back downhill towards you, so you get to collect the ball. And it was a betting game, but it was meant for peasants as a way to take out their aggressions against their landlords, their masters, and the people lording over them.
Yeah.
And over time, they would start developing new ways of throwing things at them. And eventually, right around the time of the matchlock.
Okay. What's the matchlock?
A matchlock is the grandfather of the flintlock. So the flintlock is you have a piece of flint held with a little arm, and it when you pull the trigger, it comes down and it hits a striking pad that flips forward. And as it flips forward, it reveals a little pan full of gunpowder.
Right.
And the spark shoots down at the gunpowder, and the gunpowder ignites and shoots into the barrel where there's another charge of gunpowder, thus shooting the ball out of the musket.
Yeah.
The matchlock operates similar to that, but instead of the flint, you have this constantly burning fuse that's smoking next to your head. And when you pull it, the fuse goes down into the gunpowder.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this is an older version. They would actually start shooting at, and this was developed by the musketeers themselves of Louis XIV.
Yeah.
As a way to take on the Cardinal's men. They would shoot at Jesuits and things, these cutouts of Jesuits and things. And eventually, guns became romanticized because of this, because of the musketeers. And you actually started seeing, you couldn't afford it, but you could have crossbows, you could have archery and stuff at fairs. You also had people knocking over coconuts, hence the song, I've Got a Lovely Bunch of Coconuts.
Yeah.
But you don't really see shooting galleries at fairs the way that we know them, with the little bunny rabbits and the duckies with the targets painted on them, until about 1810 at St. Bart's Fair in England, where you actually start seeing, and in Germany, they're very, very popular because Germany's a big hunting country. They love hunting. Yeah. And so it's a way, again, to hone your skills and for hunters to show off their prowess with a rifle.
Right.
And they would have these big metal-backed tents with this, setup, and you'd be shooting at metal targets.
Yeah.
In the 1820s, they would be shooting at clay pipes. They would put little clay pipes in rows, and you would shoot the clay pipes out as your target. Or you would actually have metal animals and cutouts of fools and bears and things like that. There was an industrious fellow in the 1830s whose name escapes me at the moment, who actually developed the first mechanically triggered, it was called the rabbit in the hole target. And what it was, the mouse in the hole, not the rabbit in the hole. It's a mouse in a hole. And what it is, it's a cutout of a woman that's spring-loaded. And she's got her hands holding her skirt.
Yeah.
Very sexist. And she's looking at this stump, this tree stump. And the target's on the tree stump. And when you hit the target on the tree stump, it triggers a spring in her, and she goes, eek! And she lifts her skirt up so you can see her ankles, and a little mouse pops up. And it's kind of like a whirligig type mechanism.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the first mechanically triggered target in a German fair shooting gallery. This is the 1820s.
Yeah.
And with the rise of the Civil War and the Wild West, when it becomes a constant tool,
right,
you start seeing shooting galleries, traveling shooting galleries, where they had these huge carts with metal sides on them, because it was to prevent the bullets from going through.
Yeah.
An excellent example is Back to the Future 3, in which Marty shows off his shooting skills at a shooting gallery.
Yeah.
That's a pretty accurate depiction of some of these traveling shooting galleries.
Yeah.
And it became a way for these firearms dealers to sell guns. Give it a try, check it out. Now get the real thing.
Yeah.
Try a Winchester.
Right.
The Winchester Rifle Corporation did a lot of business this way.
Yeah.
So when we get to the 20s, it's evolving, right? You get more and more elaborate with your shooting galleries, and it becomes a constant. Whether you're shooting the star out with the BB guns, and that came out of the invention of the Thompson. That was the Tommy gun.
The Tommy gun, yeah.
The Tommy gun, because you have to be able to go and be able to have controlled bursts.
Yeah.
Because you don't just sit there and, if you really, for all you carnies out there, if you want to shoot the star out, short bursts. Don't just go to town on it.
Yeah.
Short little bursts and carve it out.
Yeah.
And you start with the top one. You go from outside in. You don't go inside out.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm sorry, all you people who still run the star gag. I just ruined it for you. But that came out of machine guns, to sell machine guns, shoot the star out.
Yeah.
Because you're using BBs.
Yeah.
And then the BB gun became popular. You'll shoot your eye out. Daisy Corporation, the Daisy rifle, etc. And you'd be able to buy home targets with the Daisy rifle. And then we get to the 40s, and the war happens, right? And then you have all these servicemen and women who are getting out, and they've been practicing, and they get so good at it.
Yeah,
the carnies go, we can't make money. They're winning all the time.
Yeah,
we can't. The object is to not let them win. So that's when you start seeing squirt the water in the clown's mouth and burst the balloon. Do this in a much more controlled, gaffed manner, as opposed to a free-for-all with an actual rifle.
Yeah.
And they kind of die out in the 50s.
Yeah, except evidently at Disneyland.
Except at Disneyland, which starts off as a nostalgia thing. Yeah. So it's interesting you mentioned the whole thing with the servicemen practicing and going to town, because I went, oh, well, that's exactly where I was going to go with the end of this history of the carnival-style shooting gallery.
It's so interesting, because it seems like MacGlashan might have been the person who was just carrying the whole industry on his back for a while. Mm-hmm. He came out of World War II. He did not like working with the military. I found an interview with his daughter, actually.
Oh, wow.
Who talked about how he thought it was a bureaucratic nightmare. He thought
I'm shocked.
Most of the people he dealt with were really lazy, which is interesting because it was World War II. You'd think they'd be busy. But he, as soon as he got out, as soon as the war was over, he was like, I am done.
Wow.
And so he went back to shooting galleries. Mm-hmm. And, that's where somewhere along the way he ran into Walt.
Right.
And became friends with it, started designing something. I gather his daughter came to him and was like, all those places that you used to design for, they specifically mentioned some amusement park called the Punch, but I don't know what that was.
Oh, now I want to know.
I do too. I think he lived in Southern California, so it was somewhere there, probably. But and she mentioned the Punch, and she was like, "It's an awful place. It's just a dive. Don't do that." And he was like, "No. This guy, Walt Disney, he's going to make a nice place. It's going to be great. You're gonna love it." And so they started. To get back to where we started this part of the conversation, he put in the first gallery on Main Street, which didn't last a super long time.
Yeah.
But the Main Street Shootin' Gallery, which only lasted till like 1962, partially because there weren't very many guns. So
yeah, it was very like limited. So like it actually caused backups because people wanted to have their go at it.
Right. And purportedly Walt was not crazy about that noise on Main Street. Mm-hmm. So they got rid of it. But the next one that came up was the big one, the one that's still there now.
Yep.
Which is the at the time I think it was called the Frontierland Shooting Gallery. Now it's called the Frontierland Shooting Exposition. Mm-hmm. Which opened in 1956.
Yep.
Still open today. Still there. They when it opened, much like with the Main Street one and the one to follow this, it shot 22 caliber iron pellets.
Jesus.
And so this had a whole bunch of problems. The cool thing about it was that, you would get this nice ping noise as it hit the tin targets that were moving around, right?
Yeah, yep. That's the way it's supposed to sound.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It was cool. The downside is that the people that work there had to load the guns every time.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again. Occasionally there were ricochets. People would kind of get zinged by them. Occasionally other customers would get zinged by them.
Well, because the other part is, when they first opened these, you could aim the gun
anywhere,
360 degrees.
That's right. It was a while before they said, maybe we better cage these in a little bit. And so they would shoot these pellets, and the pellets would take a toll on the targets.
Yep.
And so the targets had to be repainted every single day. Every day. There was a special paint cart that they would wheel out at like 5 a.m.
Oh my God.
And go repaint all of the targets.
Oh, dude.
Which is super impressive if you think about that kind of quality control. Like,
true.
Is there any place else in the world that would go to that much trouble?
I don't know. I mean, there's somebody, I'm sure, who's like regretting it with mesothelioma or something like that.
Yeah.
Going, why did I paint with so much enamel?
Yeah.
Well,
the pellets were lead. That couldn't be good for you.
Well, they were forgetting because it is lead,
Yeah.
It's taking over their memories, but
by the way, I know what kind of gun that is too.
Yeah.
It is a replica of the 54 caliber Buffalo Hawken rifle. Mm-hmm. It was a hunting rifle known sometimes as the Plains rifle, and the Buffalo gun, and the Fur Trapper's gun.
My father owns an actual working one.
That's so cool.
So when I first saw him as a kid, I'm like, Dad, this is like yours. He goes, yeah, but this one's safe.
Yeah.
We actually took it boar hunting one time.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And when you fire that thing, I mean, I'm going to sound like a gun nut, but I'm actually more about historical replicas and that kind of stuff. But I was 12. My dad took me boar hunting, and he fired it. You could actually hear the bullet zing through the air.
Yeah.
After you fired, you can actually hear, you're like, we didn't kill anything with it. We took a pot. Yeah. The boar ran away, and that was it. We kind of went, well, that was our big moment.
Yeah,
because we were not Minutemen. We couldn't reload. Like it's going to take 10 minutes to reload this thing. We were not good at it, but we took a shot at it. But you could hear
John
it.
Hustoned it.
Yeah. Although, okay, this is a gun nut story. I have to. We did take it to a shooting range.
Yeah.
I think it was out in Livermore or something. Uh-huh. And it was open air, and you could buy old bowling pins and bowling balls to use as targets. And it was like, it was one of those target ranges where it's like, you can shoot whatever you want. You want to bring your AR-15? We don't care. Just don't shoot anybody with it. We're good. Gun safety, 100%. They had marshals, the whole 9 yards. But as long as you're being safe, you can fire whatever firearm you want. Yeah. And you're firing up against this huge hillock of gravel, so as the backing. And so they would, the bell would ring, everybody sets up their targets, and my dad bought a bowling ball, this old bowling ball, and a couple of bowling pins. And there was these guys who were really way too macho, they had their pythons, and we're going to shoot targets. Mm-hmm. And we're out there with all of our black powder, and my dad's loading his Plains rifle, and he's ramming it. And this guy goes, this guy's got an antique. And they're taking pot shots. And they're not hitting their target. They're just more there to make noise and be macho. Yeah. And my dad calmly looks at them, lifts it up, and he cocks it. He said, what are you going to do with that? And I think he said something a little derogatory. What are you going to do with that, old man? And my dad just took very slow aim carefully. And I went, he fired it, and it split the bowling ball in half. And the bowling ball's parts went one way, and they knocked, and it zinged so fast, it knocked over all of their bowling pins. And
wow.
Went, whoa! And he goes, 56 caliber, baby. And, blows.
That thing must have been so loud.
It's very, very loud.
Yeah.
I mean, black powder, you do not mess with it. And you really have to wear ear protection.
Yeah.
I fired it once without, and I regret it to this day.
Yeah.
My ears are still ringing from it.
Yeah.
But that's why when I go, like when you and I went to Disneyland, I don't know if you noticed when I was there, it's like I'd hit everything, every single time. Yeah. Not just because it's pretty darn easy.
Yeah, it's not that hard.
It's not that hard. But I would like to think that I actually got really good at sighting targets with that thing because I had practiced with that very type of rifle. Yeah. So, I mean, it's like this nostalgia thing of like, it's like my dad's, It's like, so it's really, really fun. The Plains rifles are really actually beautiful. Yeah. And I think the reason why they chose that is because of a television show that was very, very popular. Davy Crockett.
Davy Crockett.
Good old Davy Crockett.
And Davy Crockett himself had a sort of little mini shooting gallery at one point, but it was really more of an arcade game. It was different.
Yeah. I mean, it had the little glass panel with the back, it would look like a pinball machine.
Right. Yeah. And like a little, a bear or something would duck out from behind a tree.
And I remember being a kid and actually, when my first trip, really liking it. Yeah. It was really, really fun. But, it gets old really quick. So
I have a question for you, and I honestly don't know the answer to this. I was racking my brain, but maybe you do. So the Frontierland Shooting Gallery, or Exposition as it's now called, so you're shooting over the Boot Hill Cemetery. Yep. Right, from Tombstone, Arizona. Yep. Is this the only place in Frontierland that's actually pegged to a real world location? Because that's a real place. It doesn't look like the shooting gallery, but there really is the Boot Hill Cemetery at Tombstone, Arizona. Yeah. And I started thinking, I was like, is this the only thing, or the only place in Frontierland that is a real physical place? Obviously, there's no real Rainbow Ridge.
No. Isn't there some sort of reference to like the fort, the log fort or anything?
Yeah, the fort's called Fort Wilderness. I mean, it's just made up. Yeah.
No, the gate that leads out of the hub, that's called Fort Wilderness?
Oh, that gate? I don't know. Okay. I'm not sure.
I mean, because you've got, for a time they had like the cannons and stuff, right? Until they got rid of them. Because I don't think they're there anymore. There's a lot of barrels and pin traders there, but...
Yeah. Well, and you used to have guns at the fort on Tom Sawyer's Island, which is Fort Wilderness.
Yeah.
They used to have guns that you could kind of shoot from the turrets, though they didn't do much.
Yeah.
And cannons, too, that you just kind of point a little bit.
Yeah.
And they took those out because there was a couple of reasons. Fort Wilderness was made from real logs.
Yeah.
And so after a certain amount of time, it was starting to show its age. And this is really sad, a 6-year-old girl lost part of her finger in one of the guns in like 2001. She had her hand in the gun. She fell. And they closed down the guns after that. And then they pretty much closed down Fort Wilderness altogether. But in Florida, the fort that's on their Tom Sawyer's Island for a little while longer, which is now called Fort Langhorne, but was originally called Fort Clemens. Huh. But they changed it because they had put out a movie, I don't know, the 90s, early 2000s called Tom and Huck.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And in that movie, they go to a place called Fort Langhorne.
Okay.
So they changed the name. But there are still guns there, and you can aim them, and they actually make a noise. Huh. Like you pull the trigger, you can shoot at the Haunted Mansion, you can shoot at the riverboat, you can shoot at a lot of things. Nothing comes out, obviously.
No, but still.
But it makes a little like noise when you do it.
Okay.
And they're still there, still operating. This month at Boardwalk Times, we're deep into the D23 news. Also, take a look at my article about the origins and potential future of Frontierland. Come check it all out at boardwalktimes.net.
Branching away from the frontier a little bit because the popularity of the shooting galleries expands to other lands, apparently.
Yeah, fairly quickly. In 1962, we get the Adventureland Safari Shooting Gallery, which...
The Big Game Shoot.
Yeah, became Big Game Shooting Gallery and Big Game Shoot. It's like, we don't even have time to have a full title. We got to pull the trigger.
Big Game Shoot. For those of you who are trying to figure out where this was, this is in between Traders, the Traders store and the Bengal barbecue.
Yeah, it's kind of that sit down place in between,
which used to be like the big Indiana Jones store for a long time. But,
right. Yeah,
so it's in that alcove.
And that was evidently the first one where they said, you know what, we need to put a wire hoop so that people can't move the guns around so much.
Yeah.
Because, like, as you point out, like, they could literally take the guns and just point it at each other if they wanted to.
Oh, yeah. A lot of sibling rivalries were settled.
Yeah. Hopefully, I didn't see any record of anyone ever actually getting shot by one of those things, and they were only sort of dummy lead pellets. I mean, it was certainly
smart.
Sting.
Yeah, it was certainly smart, but oh my gosh.
That shooting gallery was known for having the most variety of targets of any shooting gallery in the United States.
Wow.
And you see sometimes... Oh, that's great. Pete's showing me a cool picture of it. I love that there's that big lake between you and the targets.
I know. It's fabulous. Like this bubbling, it's supposed to be like this jungle river, and you've got a tiki that you could shoot at. You've got this elephant with its trunk that you're trying to hit.
Yeah.
You've got, tigers, and they're all kind of like these rudimentary mechanicals, and there's crocodiles in the water that you can shoot, and making the splash in the water.
And you can find like those targets show up for auction from time to time.
Yeah.
And people buy them because there were so many of them. Mm-hmm. They're all kind of, old and rusty at this point, but
still cool.
Yeah.
You just have to paint them every day. Yeah. Just take care of them, people. Just paint them every day.
That place lasted till 1982?
Yes. And I actually have memories of this one.
Do you?
Oh, yeah. I remember this very well. When I saw that picture of it, I'm like, I remember it. I can smell the chlorine.
Yeah.
And they used to have like jungle sounds like the classic Disney elephant. And they had, the jungle drums and the whole 9 yards. But yeah, you'd shoot and you'd hit the water.
Yeah.
And I seem to remember being very little and having more fun shooting the water and making it splash than actually hitting targets and really my father off. Like, wasting my... he's having fun. That's enough. Like he walked me away. Like, that's enough.
You're not doing it right.
You're not doing it right. We'll go on the jungle cruise now. So...
I know that one closed down before the advent of the infrared rifles.
Yes.
So that one was always the lead pellets.
Yep.
I have a note that it was like the artwork was designed by Sam McKim.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, really
That's
interesting.
So cool.
After that, we ended up with the Davy Crockett arcade, which was only kind of an arcade, and that only lasted for about 2 years. It was way too late for the Davy Crockett fad, because it happened in 85. Backing up, 1971, the Frontierland Shootin' Arcade in Walt Disney World opened.
Yes. And also, we'll pause here for just a second. There was a time in which there was a gun store in Disneyland.
That's right. Though it was only replicas, because I saw the same thing.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
Yeah. It was only replicas, but there was a time on Main Street you could buy replicas of guns.
Right. There was like a museum of antique guns, and then next door you could buy replicas. It didn't last for very long. I had never actually, I say that it actually did. It lasted for like 30 years.
Yeah.
Like 1956 to 1986.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like the place where you would go to get your Davy Crockett cap guns as well. Like the kids, they would have a rack in the front, and then the parents would go, wow, look at these Del 10 flintlocks, and look at these, Wild West things. Let's go to the magic shop and, rob Steve Martin or whatever.
Do you have any memory of this gun shop? I didn't.
I did not. I don't remember that one. I don't think, because again, part where I apart from the shooting galleries, I wasn't much of a gun kid.
Right.
I mean, I know I've just told some stories about guns. That was more of my teens and more of my history interest in like pirates and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But no, I don't remember that one.
My next, and I had no memory of this at all, but I must have seen it at some point. But in Disney World, this is the next one that I ran across, the Fiesta Fun Center Shooting Gallery.
Whoa.
Yeah, which was attached to the Contemporary, the hotel. Huh. This I didn't know anything about this. I must have seen it at some point, but it was basically a giant arcade. With like a giant arcade in the hotel. It also had, it was weird. It had a movie theater that sometimes was included in the price, but sometimes it was like $1, and you go in and go see Tron, like the black hole,
right?
And there were some days where you went in and you just kind of dropped your kids off there, and you paid a fee, and there was just like food constantly being served that they could just take.
Wow.
Yeah, there was often an illustrator doing caricatures there.
Probably Roy.
Probably
Roy Williams. Roy.
Big Musketeer.
Yeah.
And while he was drawing, it was being projected on the wall so you could see him do it.
That's cool.
And it had this arcade. It was, again, a MacGlashan arcade. It was this strange mishmash of styles. Like there'd be a Western thing and a fantasy thing. There's like some what looked to be kind of animatronics.
Yeah.
And they probably weren't exactly animatronics, but there were things that looked like they might have been modeled on some of the America Sings characters. Huh. There was like a scared cat that looked like it came out of the Haunted Mansion. There were frogs that kind of looked like they might have belonged in the Jungle Cruise somewhere. And this is one of the interesting things about what happened with the MacGlashan Company. Because, like I said, Disney bought the company in 1969, but allowed them to pretty much run independently. They just, when they needed a shooting gallery, they would go to MacGlashan. So they would design this stuff with MacGlashan and put it in. And then MacGlashan would often take the designed shooting galleries and start selling them to like Cedar Fair and Six Flags. And
there was one of them. I'm looking at pictures right now of the Fun Center, and I recognize some of these gags from Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk shooting gallery.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Like the helicopter, they have like little model helicopters that would fly around. There's the pirate that's drinking in the barrel.
Right.
And there's like a smiling crocodile that looks very much out of America Sing.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I totally recognize this.
And there was some question because often you would get characters that in the shooting galleries that were so Disney-like that you would be like, why is this here? Why is this at Six Flags or whatever? And it's just because they developed it with the Disney guys and then carbon copied it all around the world.
Yeah. The
shooting gallery lasted from 77 to 95. The actual Fun Center stayed open for a little longer. And in 95, they kind of swapped out the shooting gallery to be more like ticket-based games like you do at Chuck E. Cheese. And then weirdly, Florida, a little bit later, decided to ban bingo halls. Like there was some weird anti-gambling thing that they were doing. They banned bingo halls, and Disney, I guess, to get in front of what they thought was a coming sort of scourge of this sort of thing, got rid of all of their arcade games that had ticket payback.
Oh, okay. Games of chance. Yeah. Okay.
So they at that point, the Fun Center was on its way out.
I'm surprised they didn't put it on the Mark Twain over there. Have like, riverboat gambling.
That'd be awesome.
Wouldn't that be? Well, if you should get tickets on the river.
Yeah.
Let's be illicit,
Interestingly enough, there is one shooting gallery left that a Disney shooting gallery that you can win prizes at.
Really?
It's in Tokyo. It is the Westernland Shooting Gallery.
Okay.
Which opened in 83. It's still open now. It is it's like a saloon.
Oh, nice.
And it's interesting when you look at it because it's not like a miniature saloon. Like, you look at the Boot Hill in the Frontierland gallery.
Yeah.
That's all miniaturized. There's like a full-size bartender guy standing there.
Wow.
And you just shoot stuff in the bar.
Nice.
And if you do well enough, you can win a sheriff's badge with Donald on it.
Oh, my God. I want to go to Japan now.
Just to do that,
to get, because for those who don't know, Donald is my favorite Disney character. I am a massive Donald Duck fan.
Yeah.
And I want one. eBay, here I come. That's awesome. So when did they make the transition from the lead pellets in Frontierland to the laser light and now, infrared and now laser approach? When did that happen? That
was in 1984.
Okay.
So MacGlashan had started experimenting with that in 79, but it took him a while to kind of get it going. And in 84, and at that point at Disneyland, the Frontierland shooting gallery was the only one left, but they implemented it then. And I am sure there are a bunch of painter guys who are like very thankful.
Yeah. Thank God. I don't have to inhale these fumes anymore.
Right.
Yeah. The stupid little elephant again. Jeez.
So fed up.
I think that's why that kind of has that mid-century look, because it's also very easy to just slop some paint on it and just go done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a love for the infrared target shooting galleries now.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Yes, I've had the opportunity in my youth to shoot these lead pellet things and to do the shooting the star out of the paper thing at Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk. I don't know if they still do that anymore, but they used to. But I love the one at Disneyland. When you and I went on our trip earlier this year, I dropped like about $10 into that thing. Yeah. Because that's, I should be like, I'm going to get in line for, Rise of the Resistance, or I'm going to get in line for the Jungle. No, I'm going to shoot targets.
Yeah.
Because I want to see the ghost go across the sky, or I want to see the little mine car go in and out of the mine and blow stuff up.
Yeah.
I want to see the hand come out of the grave and try to grab the bottle. All these dumb little gags.
Yeah.
But that harkens back to that clever German fellow who made the little mouse with the skirt popping up.
Right.
Because there's something there's a whimsy to it that I think people enjoy more so than just shooting the target with a bang, ding, kind of approach to it. And I think that is translated to other attractions throughout the park.
Yeah.
Including the Buzz Lightyear ride, the Toy Story ride, where it's, you put on your 3D glasses and you're shooting. It's a different type of infrared marker, but it is essentially a shooting gallery. The gallery is around you, but you're just aiming at a screen,
right?
Or you're aiming at target. In Buzz Lightyear, you're actually riding through a shooting gallery, which is a nice approach. It's just kind of cool.
Yeah,
and then the Toy Story ride, in which you're on these weird spinny things that make you want to throw up and wearing 3D glasses and you're shooting Mr. Potato Head. That one's okay. It's not my favorite, but that's, I get it. Some people just love that one.
Yeah.
And now it is expanded even further to where you are basically riding in a video game on the Millennium Falcon. Or, shoot the car, shoot the different supports so you can get more of the cargo aboard and Chewie will pick it up for you.
Yeah, and did you see the announcement about that from D23?
Oddly enough, I did just before I came over, in which they're going to expand to another adventure. So you actually go on 2 different possible missions.
Right.
That's kind of cool.
And the new one will be featuring the Mandalorian, evidently.
That's cool.
Yeah, and they showed an artist sketch of him flying next to you. And I was like, oh, neat.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that inclusion of the mythos.
Yeah.
I think over time, we've had more and more school shootings. I'm sorry to bring it up. Mm-hmm. And we've had a lot more thought about what is acceptable as far as having guns in Disneyland or having shooting, as an entertainment. Mm-hmm. And I'm of 2 minds. As a parent, I totally see it.
Yeah.
I actually live in a neighborhood where I hear gunfire a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm not pleased by that. Mm-hmm. So that part of me says, absolutely, let's not romanticize gunfire, gun warfare and shooting. But the little kid in me still wants that empowerment of the basic premise of I pull a trigger, I throw a rock, or I throw something. It has a chance of hitting the target or not. Mm-hmm. And by doing so, it empowers me because something happens in reaction to what I have done.
Yeah.
It's an instant action-reaction, call and response.
Yeah.
That you don't necessarily get just by being passive on a lot of rides.
Yeah.
And I think this is my take, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this. My take on why the shooting gallery at Disneyland and at Disney World, I mean, sadly it's gone.
Yeah.
Why that's important, and also why rides like Buzz Lightyear and the Smuggler's Run are so important is because of that passive nature of everything else.
Yeah.
And people need that release of, I actually did that.
I have some self-determination here.
I have some self-determination, and I actually have some empowerment by pulling a trigger or tossing a stone or, getting that instant satisfaction of I affected something.
Yeah.
As opposed, you go through the Haunted Mansion, it's like it's all happening at you, and you just like shut up, sit down, do not pull down on the safety bar, please. Mm-hmm. All of that, you're stuck. But when you have the shooting gallery, it's your chance to go bang, bang, bang. I made these things happen. I'm part of the magic. I did that. Cool. Move on.
I think that's a really good point. There is a place for that kind of interactivity. And obviously we just talked about that in a recent episode.
Yeah.
But I worry that it takes over a little bit much.
I agree.
And I think that for the most part, for there to be those guardrails that we talked about earlier, where you have the conflict and the facing adversity and facing your fears and triumphing over them, you need to have a little bit of your self-determination taken away. It's a weird thing to say, but it is true. You have to be able to relinquish some of the responsibility of that.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to get it wrong.
Right.
This is why, like, the Haunted Mansion or, any of the Fantasyland dark rides where you are kind of a character moving through the scenery, it works. Being passive in that role works.
Yeah.
But I do think you're right that there's a sort of pressure that builds up. Mm-hmm. And eventually you do need to take some action. And I think the shooting galleries are a great example of this. I also think, and this kind of brings it around to some of the beginning of this, I also think that's one of the values of Tom Sawyer Island.
Yeah.
Because it is not passive. It is the opposite of passive. And especially for kids, it gives them like all of the stuff that they've triumphed over throughout the day. Now they can go out and just exercise it. Like, they can take that energy and be triumphant going on adventures that they are determining themselves.
Absolutely. So I think we've reached a point in the evening where we do the second half of our very show's title.
Yes.
In which we do a plus-up.
Yes.
I'd like you to go first if possible, because I'm still formulating mine. It's pathetic, I know.
It's funny. I came in with an idea, and I was like, I think I know where this is going to go. And the more we talked about it, the more I'm like, oh, that's a great idea.
We're going to put an animatronic Walt on the opposite side of a little water moat, and we're going to shoot lead pellets at. Sorry, Abigail, that's not what I meant.
That's not nice.
That's not nice. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have made that joke.
But so here's my idea, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
The shooting galleries stays mostly the same.
Yeah.
The Frontierland Shooting Gallery. But that if you do, so you're in Boot Hill, you're shooting at a cemetery that is animating in front of you. By the way, there is one other shooting gallery that is also set in Boot Hill. And that's the one in Paris. That's
of course.
The Rustler Roundup Shooting Gallery. It looks very different. Entirely different. But it is also set in the exact same location as the Frontierland one.
That's cool.
Yeah. But my idea is that if you shoot enough targets successfully, and it's not that hard, if you shoot enough targets successfully, that you use a sort of Pepper's Ghost effect to have ghosts come up from the grave and potentially shoot back at you.
Oh, wow.
Now, they can't hurt you, obviously. No. Like, it's an illusion effect. But you're in a graveyard, you're shooting all this stuff, the ghosts get upset.
Ooh.
If you hit too many things, and they come up and they're ghosts of old cowboys, because that's where the gunfight at the OK Corral, that's where those gentlemen are buried.
One of them's got a big carpet bag.
That's right.
Yep.
And they react back to you. You need to put some glass, and you need to deal with lighting in a very specific sort of way.
Sure.
Between the shooters and the targets.
Yeah.
But I think you could do something really interesting that would be rewarding. Maybe they don't pop up and like try and shoot back at you. Maybe they pop up and come towards you, or they circle around you, or they do something, they just shake their finger at you, or Doc Holliday pops up and gives you a smile and a wink.
Right. Right.
But I want to have the ghosts come and reward you for doing a good job. That's
cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
So that's my idea. Originally, it was more like they start shooting at you, and I was like, this is actually a little scary. I don't love that idea. But I do love the idea of the ghosts coming up and recognizing you for doing such a good job.
That's really, really, really cool. I love that. Mine is much more ambitious. So it's actually kind of tied a little bit to one of our previous shows, which is the Golden Horseshoe.
Yeah.
And kind of a little bit like yours, in which, what if we turn the Golden Horseshoe into the shooting gallery? So you're actually
a real big one.
So you're in the center.
Yeah.
And you are 360, and you could actually have, like you said, the ghost pop up, but you have all these different things all over the inside of the Golden Horseshoe.
Yeah.
So it makes it a much more usable space as an attraction.
Yeah.
And perhaps you could actually tie it to some, like if enough people do, and different targets are actually activated at different stages. So Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and then the ghosts pop up.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, that could be a lot more fun.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a narrative to when you do it. So you're sitting down now, like when you sit down in an old Western movie and everybody's sitting down playing cards and everybody's suddenly go for their guns, draw, bang, 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 and you're doing your stuff. That could be a lot of fun. But I don't think it would fly, but it would be a fun idea. I actually like yours better. Like yours is like this nice, real, doable. It's very feasible. I've already gone in my head going, oh well, I know exactly where we could put the glass and where we could put the projector and exactly how we could set that up.
Yeah,
like I'm already like engineering it. Going, oh, I know how to do that.
I think the tricky thing would be, and again, I don't care that much if it's possible, but the tricky thing would be,
I do. I want to see it happen.
Yeah, the lighting, because you have so much exterior light that it would foil a traditional Pepper's ghost.
True. And also it faces sunset.
Yeah.
That's the other trick.
Yeah.
Is that it faces sunset. Now, there's ways that you can do it, but unfortunately it causes a vision block. But you know what? It's still a damn good idea.
Yeah. It'd still be really cool.
Yeah. So people of Disneyland, do not get rid of this particular attraction.
No.
Not yet anyway, because I still think there is life in this, and I still think there is a validity to it. Not just for the nostalgia, but also, as I've been saying over and over and over again during this thing, the empowerment of it.
Yeah.
I mean, and I know I'm talking about guns as empowerment, but it's not the guns, it's the interactivity that it generates.
Right.
Of that type of empowerment. And I think the whimsy of it balances it out.
Yeah.
So
I think so too. I agree. And I think that's such a great point. I think the good news, and this is maybe the great cherry on top to end with, is I think Disneyland's Frontierland is pretty safe. It needs some it needs some help. Yeah, like they need to fix some things, make some things. They just really need to take a good bite out of Frontierland and just say, this is what this is. Mm-hmm. Like really just wholeheartedly embrace what they think it is. Mm-hmm. And if people are interested in hearing what I think it should be, you can read my article. But but I think for the most part, there is a stamp being laid down on Disneyland that says, for the most part, we're going to respect the history here.
Yeah.
Even if it's fake history.
And romanticized.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, on that note, I'm Peter Overstreet.
And I am Kelly McCubbin.
And you've been listening to
The Lowdown on the Plus Up. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Lowdown on the Plus Up. If you have, please tell your friends where you found us. And if you haven't, we can pretend this never happened and need not speak of it again. For a lot more thoughts on theme parks and related stuff, check out my writing for Boardwalk Times at boardwalktimes.net. Feel free to reach out to Pete and I on our Lowdown on the Plus Up Facebook group, or send us a message directly at comments@lowdown-plus-up.com. We really want to hear about how you'd plus these attractions up and read some of your ideas on the show. Our theme music is Goblin, Tinker, Soldier, Spy by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. We'll have a new episode out real soon. Why? Because we like you.